So when you breathe in a different way, our brain starts to function differently. And therefore we have a different experience, which is a non-ordinary state of consciousness.
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger.
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
That's fatphobic.
I don't build wall. I just own halfway to Seawalk.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
I act as if God exists.
Put your masks on.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood, with your empty words.
Hey Andy.
Hey Roger.
Today we have a guest, Adam Stanecki, also known as the Breath Geek.
We got Adam on the show because both Roger and I have been really keen to do an episode on mindfulness and self-care, particularly some of the more edgy aspects of it.
Today we cover a pretty broad ground, including the power of breath, meditation, and even psychedelics.
We're really grateful to Adam for coming on, and if you want to know more about his practice, then check out our show notes for details on how to contact him, or you can visit his website at breathgeek.com.
And now for our episode.
And we're here today with Adam Stanecki, the Breath Geek. How you going, Adam?
Wonderful. It's a beautiful day already. Cannot complain.
The Breath Geek. I feel like the word geek is a little bit of a dated term now in some ways, that geek culture has been appropriated across all things.
Yeah, it's quite nice. I have a history in IT. I studied a Bachelor of Computing in the 90s. And to be a geek wasn't a positive term, but I just thought, well, what do I do all the time? I'm always talking about breathing, and I'm reading books and reading studies and papers. I'm literally geeking out all the time. So I'm just going to own it, or else I'm going to be the breath guy or the breath bloke, or what is it? Do I want to be a breath coach? What does that mean? And I thought it's kind of tongue in cheek. It's a bit silly. You know, I take the work seriously, but not myself. So let's go with it. And it seems to be something that people love. It's great.
So Breathe with Adam, the Breath Geek. I guess this is probably something that's a little bit unfamiliar to people, this sort of concept. What could that possibly mean? It's not, you know, we talk a lot about massage parlors on this show, so
I wouldn't say a lot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe maybe if you talk us through, I guess a few key details, your interests, your expertise. What is this breathing service that you offer, and what's the area of specialization?
I love that. And why should I care? I'm pretty good at breathing. I'm not dead. I've been doing it my whole life.
Very experienced.
Yeah, I get that one. I'm an expert in the breathing thing. I don't even have to think about it.
Although some people forget, don't people when they go to sleep, they stop breathing because of sleep apnea and stuff like that.
Sleep
so
apnea.
we're not quite as good at this as we think we are sometimes.
I've been traumatized by being in a room when I was a child with my dad and my uncle. And I've got to say, it was like the craziest experience ever. I didn't know whether to cover my ears or stay awake to make sure that one of them didn't die from, all the sleep apnea that they had.
And snoring and other noises during sleep.
Yeah, it was a jungle. But I'm actually been mildly asthmatic my whole life. So until you've understood what it is to actually not be able to breathe, you really do take it for granted, and how that just impacts your mentality and your idea of what's important in life.
Yeah, and there's the other dynamic of people who don't have breathing dysfunction and don't realize that they're not breathing optimally, and how that's affecting even simple stuff like getting through the day and not being exhausted by 2:00 in the afternoon. So there's different, I kind of think of breathing in terms of a wellness spectrum, if you will. Like it's the center of the hub, and all the spokes of everything else come out of the wheel of wellness, if you want to call it that. Maybe I should copyright that, wheel of wellness.
That sounds good.
But if you don't breathe, you're in trouble. Or if you don't breathe well, you're in trouble. And you think of people who are at the top of their game, elite athletes. Like the 1% or the 1% of the 1% could be in altering the way one breathes to get the edge on an opponent or excel. When you're talking about 100-meter sprints, like you're into tiny, tiny gains that you're looking for.
It's so true, Adam. I have a background in efficiency work and consultancy in that space. And, when we look for efficiencies and improvements in performance, it really matters how often you do things, right? So if you're able to make that, like you said, 1% difference on something that you do every minute of every day, it really adds up, right? And, I'm thinking back to those really popular books like Atomic Habits, where they're going through the UK cycling team and how they've managed to turn around things from being a really hard-won team to a premium, performance team by having a mentality of we're going to do just every single arena, everything to do with cycling. We're going to be 1% better than the competition.
Compounds.
Compound interest, right?
Yeah. And what I have found interesting, because I've been doing wellness, fitness work for 20 odd years, that even I wasn't thinking about breathing as a component of this thing. I owned a gym, so everything was about how do we lift more? How do we get faster? And so we're thinking about eating and recovery and supplementation and all of these things, and efficiency of movement and a functional movement. And I didn't even conceive of the idea that if someone could recover their breathing better, then you look at repeatability and things like that. So think of a game like rugby, AFL, soccer, many of these games, a big part of the game is repeatability. It's not just go, go, go. It's like go, recover, go again. And even someone like I was training Olympic athletes, didn't even think about it. And then sometimes the world just puts something in front of you and you're like, there's the missing piece of the puzzle. And the rabbit hole just opens up and you get sucked into the vortex and away you go.
So, Adam, is it just about, you mentioned in the context of, let's say, elite athletes, right? It's one of the 0.5% things you can do to, lift your performance. But what about for the rest of us, right? So everyday people, and in particular, I'm thinking, often if someone wants to introduce someone to the practice of meditation and mindfulness, usually, or at least, I'm not an expert, but in my experience, it's usually been focus on your breath, pay attention to your lungs, taking air in and slowly deflating, almost like you're paying attention to the walls of your lungs as though it's a balloon, right? Talk us through maybe how breath and breathing practice connects in with mindfulness and then subsequently even meditation.
Awesome question. Well, it's at the middle of the wheel, right? If you're not breathing calmly and you're using your meditation for calmness, then the meditation's not going to work. Even if you've got the greatest mantra of all time that your guru gave you, if you're not breathing properly, physiologically you can't calm down. I had a great conversation with a primary school principal earlier this week, and he spoke about a lot of the professional development that they're doing for stress relief for teachers moves into this idea of meditation and mindfulness. But the teachers have got too much in their heads already that learning another practice that requires a level of concentration and focus, maybe visualization, you are in a field and there's a cool stream going past you, which is all wonderful, but it requires a context. And so first we need to look at what's the easiest way to calm the nervous system down to allow, let's say, the headspace for meditation, for mindfulness, for any other activity. We could go into focus. We could go into all different aspects of healing and concentration and things like that. And so what we know with the breath is when we focus on the breath changes. When the breath moves back to, I would call a functional state, which more correctly is a normal state, because most people are breathing dysfunctionally in terms of what's appropriate and efficient and effective. So if we can get that almost the thermostat set properly, then the body and the mind calm down because they're always in communication. So we're talking about psychophysiology, mind and body connection. Calm the body down, calm the mind down. Then we can meditate. Then we can practice mindfulness. One of my favorite mindfulness activities was always like get a blueberry or a sultana or a piece of chocolate and put it in your mouth and mindfully eat, because that's one of the practices that we mindlessly do throughout the day, especially if you're busy at work. Like most people will sit at the terminal and there's my computer geek, right? I'm calling it a terminal. And eat your noodles that you got from the corner store while you're cutting some more code or writing another email or checking something. Not even thinking about what you've eaten.
Do you know, Adam, I was on the couch yesterday watching the football and I had a bag of chips, like salt and vinegar chips, and I was just like, I just kept reaching. I thought, I don't want any more, but I couldn't. I
can't help myself.
Yeah, but like I really thought there's something about this, like the psychology of it, or there's some. This is like poker machines. You know, it's hacked my psychology to anyway. But yeah, I really relate to that mindlessness of eating things like that.
Yeah, salt and vinegar chips are a trick. I mean, that's the ultimate can't stop, can't put it down. There's something about the flavor profile and how your mouth responds and the physical sensation that you just keep going for the next one and the next one and the next one.
Sorry to interrupt the episode. If you're enjoying our content, make sure to hit subscribe on your preferred podcast app so you never miss an episode.
Let your friends know about us. Your support means a lot, and word of mouth really helps.
A great way to share with your friends is to comment, engage, like, and share some of our social media posts. We're on all major platforms, and you can find our links in our show notes or our website, www.themiddle.site.
And guess what? We've got even more for you. We're building a subscriber email list so we can give access to content that you can't get any other way. Check our show notes to find out how to get added to our subscriber list, or visit our website at www.themiddle.site.
Thank you, and we'll return you now to the episode. It's so true. I always used to hate watching people just eat in front of the pantry. As someone who really does like to enjoy food, I was just, aren't you enjoying this? No, it's just like a shame eating contest where they're just trying to inhale the food in front of the pantry and then move on with the day. I remember that was a big part of this, this fad around how, French women don't get fat. And there was a book around it. And that was one of the key tenets of it, that actually a more European way to enjoy food is much more celebrating the food and the experience of it all. And if you do that, if you get the plate out, you arrange the food, you take the time to eat it, you'll find that you get less out of this response to just feed the body rather than you kind of experiencing it. You eat less.
It makes sense, doesn't it? And I think this thread continues through all of busy life as we experience it now. So many distractions, so many things to take our attention away, so many things to invest our awareness and attention into, that the basic building blocks of what keeps us alive and well, we forget about. We do them mindlessly. And again, so that's eating, sleeping, breathing, walking, basic movement. We're not even thinking about it.
Have you ever, driven your car, I don't know, like an hour to get to work or something like that, and you arrive at your destination and you just think, I do not remember any of that, of what just happened?
Yeah.
You really shouldn't drink and drive, Andy. But,
I'm not sure if I blacked out or not, but...
Who do I have to apologize to now?
Everyone. There'll be a list at the end.
But, the funny thing is, I often find this with myself. We were talking about the guitar in the back. And when I find myself running through drills on the guitar, or I'm trying to learn a new riff or something like that, I notice that I stop breathing and I kind of hold my breath. And it's something that I've had to work on, because obviously then you tense up and you can't do it. And then you just have so much tension in your body, which is terrible for most instruments. And it's like taking up that mental real estate stops the body from, breathing effectively. And I feel that really sharply.
It's really interesting that one part of your mind or your attention, or however you want to term it, goes to an activity, and then a basic automatic process is interrupted. And again, we keep coming, and I know this is why I'm the breath geek, right? I keep coming back to breath, but it's what we notice as well. So you're playing your guitar. I do it. I play bass really badly, and I'll be just trying to work out a shape on the fretboard. And I do the same thing. And I'm like the guy who's concentrating on telling people about breath. So it's not that it's a bad thing. What it teaches us is we need a little bit more awareness around the breath. And so if you notice it earlier, it doesn't become a problem. It's really interesting, though, that it does. As soon as you realize that you're not breathing, and there's some signal that the body's saying, hey, hang on a moment, champ. Yeah. You sound like Hendrix. Stevie Ray would be proud, but you're not breathing at the moment. And then you're out of flow. You're out of flow.
Imagine how it is for guitarists who also sing, right?
I don't know how they do it.
No idea.
I still cannot conceive of it. I was watching Gary Moore play the other day, just in one of the jazz Montreux, and he's Still Got the Blues, which I could just watch on repeat all day long. And he's sweating because he's under the lights and singing and playing some of the best guitar you've ever heard. And I'm just like, how does he even do that?
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, as a bit of an amateur guitarist, when I see someone like Dave Mustaine play, a riff, and he's singing at the same time, and I can barely hit the same chord at the start of every word, which is not how it's meant to be. I say, how is this happening? It's totally different brain architecture. But one thing I wanted to explore, Adam, was, we've spoken about breath and how it can be so pervasive and impact everything behind the scenes. Do you have a view on the biological aspects of people's breathing. Because what I have heard, and I have seen this come up quite a lot lately, that if you are someone who is let's say a mouth breather and doesn't choose to use their nose, and I put myself under that category, that your nasal passages and things start to, atrophy, and actually you have to retrain yourself. And I feel that same way. If I feel, and I don't know if it's an asthmatic thing, I've always blamed it, but if I try to breathe primarily through my nose, I feel that I'm not getting enough air. And so I will always then start to kind of supplement that with mouth breathing.
Yeah.
And I've always found that I feel like I have a deviated septum and one nostril is always perpetually blocked, either through sinus or something else. So I wanted to get your take on it. And more importantly, did Michael Jackson get his nose job to help with his deviated septum, or do you think it was more for vanity reasons?
I think it just fell off, Roger.
That's always the excuse for singers, isn't it? Oh, I deviated septum and they come out with a new nose.
I don't know, but we could probably talk about why Stevie Nicks might have had some ENT problems. So I don't know if Michael had the same problems as Stevie, but there's a dynamic going on there. I don't think Stevie actually has a septum left, so she can't deviate it. It's burnt right through. See, we're going to have to add Stevie to the apologies list at the end of the episode now.
Sorry, I know just what to send her. It's all right.
So to answer your question, I don't know about Michael Jackson. I don't think he just went too far down the rabbit hole, and there was no way back for him. So that's an easy one. But I'll tell you what's interesting about Michael Jackson, if you just go and look at photos of him from when he was literally a young man, Jackson 5 singing, size of his nose, beautiful breathing apparatus, big nostrils, like beautiful wide face, as opposed to what you'll see with a mouth breather. And, like people hear mouth breather and they hear derogatory term. There's a reason that we perceive it to be a derogatory term. Because you look at something like, there's a great photo of Napoleon Dynamite with his just mouth open, and he looks dopey. There's a reason that we say, oh, just another mouth breather, country yokel, blah, blah, blah. It's the reason we do it, because it looks unintelligent. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So I'll put apologies to all mouth breathers at the end of the episode as well. But you look at Michael Jackson's nose, as he went through like the phases of surgery, his nose gets smaller. I guarantee you he had trouble breathing. There's no way he couldn't have, because the actual apparatus, just the size of those two holes that he was breathing through, got smaller.
Given breathing is so, for most of us, I suppose, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but a big part of your practice is to turn breathing from the subconscious to the conscious, or at least have some more awareness of it. Mm-hmm. But is it possible to, because we've been talking about mouth breathers, right? Is it possible for a mouth breather to interrupt that kind of subconscious preference? Is that something that you can have success, or we just default to the...
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely can. It's habit. Ultimately, it's habit, because we don't naturally breathe through the mouth. Like Roger was saying, there's something... The nose isn't functioning, therefore it's easy to open the mouth and I'll breathe through my mouth. Everyone does this when they get a common cold. Nose blocks up, you breathe through the mouth. Because you don't want to get dogmatic about it. You get dogmatic about, no, I'm not a mouth breather. I'm just going to breathe through my nose. And then you die because you can't breathe. Of course, you're going to breathe through your mouth.
Is it a physiological reason why people breathe through their mouth? Or is it just getting used to it and falling into a bad habit? So if you are one of those people who, feels they're not getting enough breath through their nose, that, obviously brings the mouth into action. Is that in response to a physiological problem that can't be turned off, or is it wholly in the mind?
More from column A than column B would be my guess. It's an educated guess at this point, because when it comes to breathing, we don't know everything. But in my estimation, most people start breathing through the mouth because the nose is impacted in some way.
So, Adam, the most important question I've got to ask now is, are you supposed to breathe in with your nose and out with your mouth, or vice versa, or both from your nose?
All nose, all nose. Now, there are times when breathing through the mouth becomes appropriate. Again, if you're an elite athlete and you've just done a maximal sprint and you need to recover your breath so you can go again, you will have to breathe through your mouth.
So is breathing through the mouth like an evolutionary, backup to the nose?
Yeah, it's like the escape valve. Nose not working, use mouth. And it's brilliant, because if we didn't have it, literally people would die. You would. If you just gaffer taped someone's mouth and their nose blocked up, this has happened before. In less desirable circumstances, people's mouths have been masking taped closed, the nose has become congested, they die. Whereas if that tape wasn't there, nose becomes congested, still breathe through mouth.
It's so true. And I think you can relate it to asthmatic, as I'm asthmatic as well. When you have an attack and you can't get enough oxygen, you feel as if you are suffocating, you're going to die. And then obviously the body panics and that makes it worse. So it's this kind of microcosm of an anxiety attack in some ways, because
it's almost the same physiologically, almost the same.
The answer is to relax, but you can't breathe. So you're panicking, right? You're drowning.
Adam, I want to take us now to have a conversation about the connection between breath and the mind, and I guess intersections, or at least how people can have experiences that are equivalent to, almost like a psychedelic experience, or, get into or understand the mind a little bit better and actually observe things that they can't, or you wouldn't naturally be able to observe. People talk about it being up there in the most sort of top 5 most profound experiences in their lives. And, meditation is seen as an alternative pathway to get to a similar state of consciousness, I guess, if that's the way to put it. And I guess the other aspect to all of this is that often things like meditation, and they're seen probably by the general public quite skeptically. People are quite cynical. They think, oh, that's just like airy-fairy religious stuff, or this is just, people interested in crystals and all that sort of stuff, or else, but there's actually some real science behind it. So I was wondering if you could maybe take us through your understanding of, the connection between breathing and the mind, and, you mentioned meditation and hypnosis as well.
It's an interesting discussion. And look, honestly, this is a big rabbit hole, and I love it. I love this rabbit hole. I'm a big believer in most of us go through our lives in a trance. Whatever you want to term a trance. People have their own experience of what trance is. Driving your car, not remembering how you got there. You're in a trance. You did it safely. If you really sat down after that and had to think about every particular action that you took on that 30-minute drive, you would be able to remember it and recall it. It's just that you're doing it on autopilot because you've done it so many times. It's not that you zoned out and you became completely dangerous. So there are trance, like watching a movie, trance state. Because how many times have you watched a movie and laughed or cried or felt sad or whatever? You're watching a movie. Like it's Tom Cruise or it's The Rock or it's Meryl Streep. You know that they're not these people, and yet you get absorbed into it. So there's a term that people have started to use instead of like altered states of consciousness. They've been using a term called non-ordinary states of consciousness. And I think that describes it a little bit better. It's easier to grasp because everyone has had experiences of states of awareness and consciousness that aren't ordinary. Like if we take, for example, that let's assume we are all in an ordinary state of consciousness for ourselves right now. But if you just zone out for the moment staring at the wall, then your consciousness shifted. It's no longer ordinary. And ordinary maybe being 80-20. 80% of the time it's ordinary, and then 20% of the time on the bell curve, you're elsewhere. So when you breathe in a different way, what happens there is you can change the biochemistry in your body. Balance between the respiratory gases of oxygen and carbon dioxide. You can limit the amount of blood that flows to your brain. So your brain is going to function differently. When you start to use visualization and different meditation techniques, like there's been imagery of the brain, different parts of the brain activate. So our brain starts to function differently. And therefore we have a different experience, which is a non-ordinary state of consciousness.
Yeah.
So we can use chemicals to do this as well. Psilocybin, DMT, all of these psychedelic substances. But you can use non-psychedelic substances and have a non-ordinary state of consciousness too. Like just go and have 6 beers. That's a different state of consciousness.
Or a Pentecostal church service, from what it seems.
Yeah, exactly. But that's exactly right. Like I would argue that to some extent, the experiences in churches like that, it's group hypnosis, group trance, even just your basic Catholic prayer. There's a meditative aspect to that. Now, whether you're asking God for something or you're just in a state of calm concentration on your faith, that's not normal. That's not ordinary. That's a definite shift.
Yeah. It's a really interesting, I really like that description and how you've put that in, because, I know people that have struggled with addiction and things like that, and they use the term elevated. So I'm in a kind of an elevated state at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting with that is that, most people who, let's say, are in an ordinary state of mind, a baseline state of mind for most of the time, have very, very little empathy for people who deal with addiction and altered states because they can't imagine losing control of their mind. But really, when you think about it, you experience differences in your mind all the time, right? You have a crash after lunch, you have a dopamine rush when someone told you something funny, or that you have an intimate moment with someone. And whether it's, like you said, because of a chemical intervention or something that happened through stimuli, your mind is capable of so much more than what you think of it as this ordinary base.
Yeah, and ultimately you think about it, it all comes down to chemistry. It's the neurochemistry and how dopamine, serotonin, whatever else is firing off in your brain, not my particular area of expertise, but we all know what that feels like. We get excited, we feel love, we feel compassion, we feel fear. And so our brain's getting bathed in different chemicals all the time. So regardless of what the actual input is, there's a result going on here. And I don't even think we know 5% of what's going on with our brains, let alone our minds and whatever consciousness actually is. Like, that's a huge area to investigate.
It's something that when you hear popular accounts of people who have had psychedelic experiences, like when Andy was talking about these really profound ones, and I'll pick on someone like Sam Harris, right, explaining his things. And he uses this beautiful, as he always does, he kind of describes this as once you've kissed the shores of insanity, you empathize with everyone's state of mind. And you realize how paper thin that margin of feeling normal versus not is, right? Mm-hmm. And how it's actually quite fleeting. And you have people who've been through these states have a greater empathy for all different states of minds and what people are going through, right? And they call that kind of cure of wellness for relating to people. And I think there's something there too about how we treat each other.
I've had numerous psychedelic experiences and I always come back feeling more compassion and more connected. It's almost like the veil gets lifted and you notice the porous structure of everything. And maybe, I mean, it kind of sounds negative, but I don't think it is, just how tenuous reality really is, or sanity really is, if there even is such a thing. Like, we're starting to get into semantics and verbiage now, and we're trying to put words on top of experiences that are really hard to talk about. So, but if you get to, like, if you go into a deep psychedelic experience, whether that is through like getting high on your own supply, like doing a big holotropic breathwork session and effectively hyperventilating yourself into an altered state, or you do a heroic dose of psilocybin, like, that's on the edge. And there's an interesting experience of how out of control you are. Even if you're in a safe environment and it's facilitated, it's still like, whoa, okay, this is different. I'm experiencing something new here. There's something to learn. Yeah. And I think that speaks to what you were talking about people who have, let's call them psychological challenges. And I'm putting a really one term over a big bucket of things here. But we need to realize that stuff's real. Like, that's people's experience. And we're not going to affect any positive change with people who have those challenges if we can't empathize.
Yeah.
You look at a large amount of people who have drug addiction problems got there because they were trying to self-medicate.
Andy and I have spoken about this before, and the real problem with empathizing is that everything in society is based around personal agency and control, and the legal system, the law and reform. And as soon as we entertain this notion of perhaps people aren't always in control of their thoughts in the way that we would like in terms of their states, the whole law and order system breaks down. Right. So we find it very hard to move into that area sometimes, I think.
Well, at least the notion of, we need to have retribution as part of the justice system, like, it's hard to feel. I mean, it's a bit like getting angry at a bear because it attacks someone, like it's, or a shark. Yeah. I mean, like, in some ways, what's different between an animal in the wild and us? I mean, so
the clothes that we wear and our hairstyles.
Yeah. I was about to say pants are probably a pretty strong one. Never seen a bear in pants.
Adam, one of your comments before around it's hard to explain, people who have, let's say, psychedelic experience. I read a book by Michael Pollan, who writes all about plants normally, but I guess a lot of this stuff comes from the plant world. But he I think tried psilocybin and a few other.
Mescaline.
I think he did the whole tour, right?
He did.
But he did it for the first time, I think, in his 60s, because I think he missed the original wave when he was growing up. He just missed it. He was just a bit too young, and so he's come back to it now. But anyway, he makes a whole thing about in this book, about how, like, the ineffability of these experiences, how you just can't describe them with words. And I must admit, reading his book, which I think the book that I read was called How to Change Your Mind, to me it felt the closest thing you could have reading that book to a psychedelic experience without having psychedelics. So so he nailed something in there.
And he's got a documentary as well that sort of goes with, it might even have the same name as the book, actually.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, it was on Netflix.
Yeah, it shows his journey going to these different places in the world and like connecting with shaman and things like this.
And before, just on the whole religious thing, one of the observations that set and setting, the importance of
course,
and the famous Tim Leary, in the church or the cathedral in the university, and how combining LSD with the power of God, how that brings it to life. And I found it amazing. I mean, I must admit, I think it's a good thing that now we're, particularly for things like depression and considering potentially some of the therapeutic merit of some of these substances, is at least the research is coming back, because it was pretty much stopped for 50 years or so.
Yes, it was stopped, wasn't it? all of this wonderful stuff could happen. Can't let them have control of their own thoughts.
That's right. Well, what was it?
Let's not let them have agency and sovereignty.
Not to get into a rabbit warren on this question, but I do think it's worth noting or putting on the table that these drugs, or if that's the way to put them, like LSD and psilocybin, they don't come with some of the same baggage as other forms of illicit drugs. So it's not the same as crystal meth or cocaine or heroin.
No.
These drugs don't have those same, and I think one of the things is they don't have the addictiveness of those drugs, and so I don't think we'll get into unpack all of that, but I mean, as we're talking about this topic, I think that's probably worth throwing out there.
Yeah, it's verbiage. We use the same term for substances that aren't similar. I mean, they all cause some kind of a shift in your state, but there's a very different mechanism with an opiate and a psychedelic, but they work differently. And again, it's not my area of expertise. Like I'm very shallow on my knowledge in this area, but they're not the same thing. So the fact that they're both called drugs is interesting to me. Mm-hmm. We could call caffeine a drug, right?
Well, that was how I started the episode today with a cup of coffee. So
that's why I'm shaking right now.
That's why I didn't sleep last night.
Look, all of the people that I know who've had psychedelic experiences came back changed for the positive. Now, I'm not saying that's true for everyone, but that's an interesting non-scientific study. That I know quite a few people that have had different experiences, whether they've been because of desiring some fun, or they've done it as a true plant medicine journey with a facilitator. All changed.
I guess the a bit of a public health advisory. There is a chance of a bad trip with some of these substances as well, and
can be. I'm
not sure what the ratio is, and probably different people have different proclivities towards it. And then, of course, there's also certain, as I understand, people who have things like schizophrenia, for example. It's recommended against, taking some of these substances. But I mean, I guess this is where the benefits of science and more research can actually help us understand it a little bit better. And even if we're not all taking it as currently you can take marijuana in California or Colorado, maybe even if we don't get to that state, then certainly, some of the cases of where it's being used to treat particularly, people who have terminal illnesses and to help them grapple with what's ahead of them, that does seem to have some promising benefits.
I find it really interesting, even when you look at opiates are used in medical contexts all the time, for anesthesia, for pain relief, like post-operatively. I can remember getting, when I had my shoulder operated on, they gave me some of the most powerful, I had one of these tablets and I'm like, I am not having another one. I'm almost on another planet for hours.
Yeah, I think the thing for me, whenever I hear accounts of people having very, very profound experiences from psychedelics, having that one big trip and that breakthrough and so on, it's always very life-changing and often results in a lot of corrections in their life. And I think, as you would probably reflect on your practices as a coach and your many forms and of your career, Adam, that people have to be ready for that. You don't have a bag of mushrooms or something to tell you've got things in your life that you are generally either unhappy with or know you should do something about, but you don't. And maybe it's the reasons, being upfront with the reasons to yourself why you're not doing that. But I think there definitely is a case for that you have to be ready to face those reasons and actually want to do something about it rather than maybe just complain about it periodically. And I do find that with people I talk to sometimes when they're searching for this meaning in life or this profound experience, maybe because they're bored or they feel unhappy with certain circumstances, but perhaps they're not ready to face it or really do anything or take the risk to do anything about it, to face their own demons, so to speak. Have you found that in your coaching practice that more and more psychedelics and interventions in that way are being used as that breaking point to say, we're going to force this to happen?
Not so much with psychedelics, but there's still I think it's been for a long time, a desire to find the silver bullet and like what's the missing ingredient, or what's the one thing that I could do right now that will make everything in my life better, as if like that epiphany is going to continue and you'll just be in a state of samadhi and bliss the whole time, not realizing that it's a change, and then you've got to make a course correction yourself in your life. And so whether it's plant medicine, whether it's a wellness retreat, whether it's an ice bath. Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is. It might be a nothing. Sometimes you don't need anything. Just go sit in silence for a little while and it'll come to you. But to answer your question, I don't think it's so much the item or the practice or the thing as it is the desire to just give me the one thing that I'm missing. That's still pervasive. Yeah. And you see it a lot in the coaching world, which is why I'm doing my best not to call myself a coach, because it seems to be that as coaching becomes more of a commodity, that it's almost that there is an expectation that the coach has the answer. Like, I've got the one thing that you need to get from X to Y. And I don't necessarily believe that's true. It's all process. It's all experience and practice, commitment, consistency, personal responsibility. They all sound like just throwaway lines, but when you sit down and really consider them, I think they're very important.
Adam, after this, I'm going to go and hit some tennis balls on tennis court. And I just finished reading an old book called The Inner Game of Tennis. And I wouldn't want to synthesize it into a pithy point, but my sort of key takeaway was that there's no point. The book talks about almost two consciousness, really, like the part of the mind that, the inner voice in your head that tells you what you should be doing and how you're not worth it and you're not hitting the ball properly. That side of the brain is different to the actual side of the brain that actually controls our movements and hits the ball. And there can be a disconnect between the two. And yeah, I mean, to your point, it was basically saying just let the second part of your brain do its job.
Oh, I don't know, Andy, you get pretty close. 3 degrees tilt.
3.5.
I need more top spin. What do I have to do, coach?
Put him in the scanner again. We'll decompose this. Before moving off this topic, I do want to say that when it comes to any kind of coaching, psychedelic, any kind of change in people's lives, I think one of the biggest things working against them being accepted and also being supported and encouraged is that it's so threatening to the networks and the people, their support community around them, right? And I think this is something that most people don't really stop to reflect on, that the people that love you the most don't want you to change. Mm-hmm. They don't want you to change. True. And because there is nothing more threatening than you going through some profound personal journey that leaves them behind. So whether it's, and this extends to lots of things, and in really dark ways too, like whether you are dealing with problems that don't work for you, health-wise or habits or whatever, the people that are closest to you do not want you to change because they feel threatened and they love you. Or they want you the way they are for many different reasons, too many to list. And I think that while psychedelics is seen as this big, perhaps you go in the trip and come out someone different, I think it's going to be very hard to gain that mainstream support for some of these things because of that nobody wants to lose anyone,
Yeah, it's powerful. We want change because we want things to be different, but we also want to stay the same because we're comfortable.
Growing up, when I was much younger, there was we had a group of friends, and on a really superficial level, one of them was very overweight. And as they decided enough was enough, I saw systematically the group of friends that I in just methodically reject him, because they didn't want him to lose the weight. They didn't want him to change.
Roger, is that why you stopped hanging out with me at the playground?
No personal experiences here.
So, Adam, we've sort of touched on a little bit, but want to maybe take us now to the concept of personal responsibility. And in particular, a lot of these things we've been talking about today, I mean, I guess they're adjacent to the self-improvement or self-help sort of space. They're not quite the same, but this is really, I think, the territory of people who want to think about the way that they're living their lives a little bit more and taking control. So, yeah, I just want to touch on this topic. So just in terms of our personal responsibility, values, boundaries, not being nice, where's the line?
I think it's the core of everything. And I think it's really interesting because we're almost taught from a young age to have an external locus of control, like the government will take care of you, society will take care of you, mum and dad will take care of you. I don't remember, you might have had different experiences. I don't remember being taught anything about personal responsibility at school. And then I got to uni and it was like, oh, by the way, now you have to be in charge of your schedule, getting to your tutes, getting to your lectures, making sure you've studied enough, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you've got to feed yourself and transport yourself and all this kind of stuff. I was like, oh, yeah, well, that would have been nice. We could have practiced that for the last few years, couldn't we?
It's so true.
So it's
I just remember being lost as like a first year university student. I'm like, hang on, isn't someone going to go and tell me where I've got to be? And, you know, you've got to figure it out yourself.
Well, I can remember turning up on the first day that was just like free beer everywhere because everyone wanted you to turn up and join their association. And I'm like, well, I'm not making any decisions now. There's free beer. And so that added to it. And then all of a sudden you've got the social and the cultural stuff going on the university. And you're like, I haven't even worked out which class I'm supposed to be going to. That was hilarious.
Those society booths are always so weird, aren't they? And there's always one of the booths that seems to be staffed by someone that's at least in their late 40s. I don't know why. It's just so
never
weird.
Went to work.
They got into university politics and never got out.
It's my niche.
What do you actually do? This is my third PhD. In what?
It's a great way to meet women.
Some esoteric thing that no one's ever heard of. He's never leaving university. He's got 14 dissertations. And
they might lose their study support payment.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll study.
I quite like living in squalor and just turning up to the uni cafe to have a cuppa of bad coffee.
Pot noodles.
Pot noodles. Oh, I'm having flashbacks to the 90s. I'm showing my age now.
I'm trying to think about that question you posed, Adam, where, you know, what about school taught you, if anything, taught you about personal responsibility? And the only thing that I can relate is that the school Andy and I went to was notorious for having like no toilet paper in the stalls, in the bathrooms. And I'm like, maybe that was the lesson, that if you needed to take a shit, you better bring some stuff, man. You better pack your own.
Ultimate preparation.
Yeah. None of this sitting there with a bidet.
You only make that mistake once.
People only learn lesson when they wipe. So,
So it was you that was taking the dumps in at lunchtime, Roger?
Oh, anyway, even an open house. No shame.
I think we need to work out who was stealing the toilet paper. That's the ultimate concern.
They were the guru. They grew up to be the coach, the life coach. Yeah. They're teaching everyone a lesson.
I'm teaching lessons.
One shit at a time.
It's on a different. The lessons I'm teaching are on a different level.
And you know who's learnt the lesson from the handshake later on. Part of the crowd.
Oh dear. Yeah, that's teaching personal responsibility. But it's interesting. Like, there's not a lot of stuff that focuses on it, really. Like, it's sort of come into the yuck term, like the personal development industry, because it is an industry. But personal development's such a yuck term now. That this idea of personal responsibility, and I'm seeing it co-opted now by judges talking about what it is. So like you're talking about like vacuous, empty concepts that don't actually teach anything. They just allow you to sell your next package. Because what is personal responsibility? What do you need to establish that? You need to have a center, a true north, an idea of what you believe in and what's true for you or what you value. Like what is that? If you can't define that, how do you know you're pointing in the right direction? How do you know what you'll stand up to? How can you set any of your boundaries? Where are those boundaries? What happens when someone encroaches upon a boundary? Do you value honesty? And to what point do you value honesty? Are you honest all the time, even when you know that it's going to upset someone close to you? Like you tell your best mate, you are fat. You probably need to start jogging and eating less Big Macs. Because that's honest, but is it empathetic? Like maybe there's a reason that person's hiding behind weight.
I think that's called fat phobic now, isn't it, Adam?
I don't know. Everything's shaming people now. Just say the wrong word and you're shaming someone.
I'm surprised the mirror hasn't been cancelled.
I don't know. Like my generation, I'm on the tail end of Generation X. The whole generation was angry. We were angry at everyone. Don't know why, but we were. And now it's like, no, you can't say that to anyone. So it's a big, okay, we're navigating this now. That's all right. That's okay. It's all changed. And maybe that's got something to do with personal responsibility as well. Like if everyone had more personal responsibility, they're less worried about what everyone else is doing that's offensive.
Yeah.
Because like I'm in my own little, I've worked my own thing out. And if I am overweight, you can say I'm fat, but that's okay because I know why I am. Or you can say I'm blah, 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 whatever, you know, like call me a boomer or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, I grew up in the 60s. I'm not me, but you know what I mean? Like, yep, I have that belief system because I grew up at that time.
Sorry, Adam, I get called a boomer by my 10-year-old son, so.
Oh, wow. It's lost all meaning.
It's all that Pink Floyd I listen to.
The bit about the values
The
is
kids
interesting.
don't get Floyd.
COVID, right? And I think that I know, Adam, you know, listening to some of your work, you have explored this area already in your own podcasts and your own themes, some of the stuff around COVID, right? But something that I thought was a really interesting point of exploration was this idea of what an individual does versus what a group does, right? And I think that the two are very different, and you see yourself different as part of a group versus an individual. You know, mandates, whether they be the vaccine or whether it would be complying with certain rules around lockdowns and things like that, were very, very divisive. So I'm actually really keen on your experience. Did you have any reflections on how it was managed there?
I don't think it was managed at all here. I think we just flew by the seat of our pants. What I remember was the initial suggested lockdown. I think it was almost like a soft lockdown. There wasn't a mandate. It was like, hey, we don't know what that's going on. Probably stay home is a good idea. So I just said, fair enough. Kids, you're not going to school. We don't know. But you'd still be able to go for a walk. There was no madness of like wearing a mask in your car while you're by yourself so you can't catch a virus that's airborne, that's only airborne. There was none of that stupidity, like believe the science, but not your science, just my science. There was none of that. And that was a beautiful time. And you were speaking about collaboration before. So a few interesting things happened. Musicians got together from their lockdowns in their different American apartments and put music out, and all this kind of stuff happened. Like I remember Powderfinger did a at home in lockdown kind of show that they televised out for free. So there was still some kind of positivity at that point.
Adam, sorry to interrupt you, but I was hoping we might do a rendition of Imagine Now, the three of us.
Oh dear, I can't sing, so I mean I might have to go and find my piano and just play two notes on it.
I'm a mouth reader, Andy. I can't sing and breathe at the same time. So
I struggled talking enough, but it was so. And then we didn't have the same problems, like for example with Melbourne. I'm just going to use the word draconian because it's madness. What happened in Melbourne, because that all came back up from my friends, all the stuff that happened down there. But I live in an area that's lots of semi-retired, retired people, a whole bunch of quasi-hippies, people who just work for themselves and they're up here for the vibe, not to make money. So it was kind of a really interesting melting pot of different beliefs, but no one really went at each other with, like you haven't been this and you decided to do that and it's affecting my grandma this way. They didn't get much of that here.
Just like so much of the experience during COVID, I think it was just this flashpoint that everyone kind of, aligned to their tribes on, right? And became really ideological, no matter what the issue was, whether it was mask mandates. Like at the start of the pandemic, the advice was, don't wear masks. That's irresponsible to wear masks. And then like those same people would do the 180-degree flip. Oh, why aren't you wearing a mask? That's irresponsible that you're not wearing. Like, and then on the other side, you had people who were like, this is the scamdemic, and this is just just the flu. People didn't really examine it through the lens of what we're actually experiencing, as opposed to the people who I associate with, and that the person that I see myself as. What's the default view that's going to align me with my people? And I think that was probably one of the worst things during the pandemic. And I think that happened, we saw quite a few really ugly sides of our society in terms of thinking about, for example, vaccine mandates, right? Initially it was, okay, we all need to get on board, get to the 80, 90%, 95%, whatever. And I think that was a goal that we needed to pursue as a society to protect our people. But people kept this view that if you were not vaccinated, you're putting me in danger. And which was proved false very early on because it didn't affect transmission. So, people became so dogmatic and didn't bring out the best of us.
No, it's the strangest thing. It just reminds me of 1984. It's like it came out of the 1984 playbook. I've had my best friend in the universe and I have had an animated discussion at one point about the messaging that came out from the government about vaccines. And he swore to me black and blue that there was never any messaging around it stops transmission, because at that point we were talking about how it reduces symptomology, which to my mind is a personal medical decision. Like if we're talking about how individually we are going to respond to an illness, then that should be up to us. We're no longer talking about transmission. We're not talking about any of that kind of stuff. So it's no longer a public health decision. Anyway, one of the smartest people I know, and he swore black and blue that there was never any information. And I said to him point blank, I can go and find you that information if you want to read it. And we agreed to disagree because good mates we'll table that one and have another schooner and it'll all be okay. But a few months later, he came back and he said, yep, you were right. I've seen all of the stuff. And that's what they were saying at the start. But there's so many people that didn't come back and have that second conversation. The narrative changed and they just continued, like doubled down on, I am going to die on this hill. Well, I'm like, look, it's there. Data, information, all there, documented.
The irony was, I think, that COVID presented Australia with a chance for most people to actually slow down, listen more and have a conversation, but people did the opposite. Mm-hmm. They just branded and judged really quickly and just went back to where they felt their tribe was and who they were aligned with socially. And I think that was disappointing, looking at it as a whole, right? I have a little bit less faith in it all coming out of this, right? And I that's just one small aspect, right? But that was very disappointing. And I think it's, to your point, we're just not, even though there's people still areas of being oppressed and things like that and all sorts of systemic disadvantage in society, I think Australians and Western people in general aren't really just used to being told no. That we have quite a small tolerance for people telling us what to do. And I think that COVID was that real sticking point. Is like, oh, actually, no, the government can be very authoritarian with you when needed. And actually, you need to be thankful for it. So I think that was a very hard lesson for people to be reminded of.
But Adam, the most important question to wrap this episode up is: did the pandemic come from a lab in Wuhan, or was it a CIA conspiracy?
Both.
Well, I think it can be both, because wasn't the CIA or America working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology or whatever it's called?
Well, honestly, this is out there as well. This is the stuff that's kind of like, oh, is it a conspiracy theory? And you can say no, because if you do enough basic investigative journalism, which journalists don't do anymore, you can actually see who paid for the research at that lab, what the research was, and put two and two together. Because, if there's like a lab doing gain-of-function research on a certain type of virus, where a certain type of virus comes out, I mean, most people would go, oh, let's investigate that. But maybe they ate a monkey. I don't know. I wasn't there.
It doesn't matter.
I have my own beliefs. I think we need the conspiracy theory version of the middle podcast.
Well, whichever way it's
2 a.m.
But whatever the answer is, it's going to be a conspiracy theory, like whether it's someone's made an error somewhere, either someone's eaten a pangolin, or what was the South Park episode with the Randy went to China with Mickey Mouse and did something with a pangolin or a bat or something. Then there's the model where it's a lab leak or some American involvement somewhere. There's no way of putting it that doesn't make someone look bad.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And we usually like to not always end, but Andy and I will often do I'll propose a bit of a speed round. And I thought for you today, just off the top of your head, and it doesn't have to, we're not about pure facts and everything. I'm going to read out some breathing inventions or things that you can buy, and just your kind of view on whether it's kind of bullshit or legit. And I'll kind of read through a few of them and see what you think. All right. So first one, mouth tape to wear when you're sleeping to encourage nasal breathing.
I do it every night. Cheapest, most effective way to get 8 hours of good breathing.
Oh, nice. What about the moustache, though?
You just got to get the tape right.
Okay.
Under the moustache.
Next one, peak flow meter.
Ultimately useless. In my estimation, I'll tell you why. I'll answer this one with a bit of detail. I had to use a peak flow meter when I would see a doctor because I had asthma, which assesses your ability to blow out at a certain velocity, and it checks the amount of volume that goes out. Now, if you're an asthmatic and you breathe out hard through your mouth, it makes you want to cough, which is exactly why you're at the doctor in the first place, because you don't want to cough. And it never taught them anything about my symptoms. It's like BMI. It's just an innocuous measurement of nothing. Someone's going to get upset about that and write in my body.
I'm just thick.
I'm totally thick with 2 C's.
All right, next one. Lung exercises such as power breathers.
Give me an example.
So it's marketed as pretty much a device that looks like a snorkel mouthpiece that you breathe into, and it kind of labors your breathing with the idea that it'll strengthen your lungs.
Okay, so restrictive breathing devices, I think, have a place because it's kind of like doing resistance work. You're doing resistance breathing. So if you think if you're doing a squat or a bench press, you're doing resistance muscle work. I have a problem with the ones that make you breathe through your mouth. So there are devices that you can get there, like called a sports mask. There's different ones which go over the everything. So you can still breathe in through your nose with restricted breathing. So I would prefer that. So yes, they work, but I don't like the ones that make you breathe in through your mouth.
Okay. This one might be controversial. What about the full-on gas bombing sleep apnea mask that you wear while you're sleeping?
Well, if you've got sleep apnea and you're not sleeping, I think you need to look at a device that can improve it. But what I would say is, as an adjunct to that, you can investigate ways of improving your sleeping that might get to the point that you don't need a CPAP machine or anything that's similar. So it's kind of like intervention. It's the same as with asthma. I would never say to anyone, don't take your asthma medication. But I would also say, with breathing practice, I don't need to take my asthma medication. So there is a possibility that could be true for you too. Doesn't mean it will be.
There's a progression like anything, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's where a lot of people get upset with the idea of the Buteyko method or any other type of breathing method, where they think what we're suggesting as instructors is we know better than the doctors. You don't need to do that stuff. It's not like that at all. It's like this is a possible way forward for you. So yeah, it's horses for courses. Like CPAP machines, could you imagine not being able to sleep or having sleep apnea that's so great that you might literally not wake up? Use the device that keeps you alive, and then work out what's next.
Yeah. All right. And then last one. I don't know if Siri or Alexa's listening to me, and maybe there's some conversations about me snoring, but I keep getting marketed these little Pat Cash style nasal strips that go over the top of your nose, the bridge of your nose, to dilate. Nasal dilators, I suppose. What about those?
Yeah. So there's two. They're good. There's two versions. There's the strip that goes across here, which is kind of as if you're pulling your nose open with your hands. And then there are ones that kind of fit up your nose that open your nostrils out. So for anyone that has any restriction, or these work really well at night. So if you tape your mouth shut, but you feel like psychologically you're not getting enough air in, using a nasal dilator to open the nasal cavity so you feel you do get more air in, but you also get the feeling of more air going in so you don't freak out as much. They're a good idea. I don't know why the strips didn't take off more in professional team sports, because they were worn for a little while and then not a lot. My belief is no one was breathing through their nose, so putting strips over the nose didn't affect anything anyway. They were just recovering breathing through the mouth.
Yeah, it was big in tennis for a while in the kind of early 2000s, but then you didn't see much.
AFL too.
Yeah.
A few people wearing it, but then gloves went out of fashion in the AFL as well. But I think, and it might be again a bit of a guess, but if you put something on your nose to open up your nasal cavity, but you don't actually breathe through your nose while you're playing your sport, there's not going to be any data that says it's better for you. So then some performance coach somewhere says it's not worth the $3.50 it costs us a week to do it.
All right, Adam. And I'm going to leave you with the last one that actually I was impressed with in terms of a online marketing campaign to myself. Very, very inventive. Haven't heard this one before. And I'm bringing it to you as a bit left field because one of the spouted benefits was breathing, increased breathing. It's a panel. It's an infrared or UV panel that sits under your desk so that while you work from home, you can get UV light on your testicles, which is meant to be the proper increase in testosterone and other things like that.
Is this why you're both not wearing pants right now?
Well, either not pants or some kind of chap situation, but yes, they must be exposed to the panel that kind of reflects upwards.
I'm sitting on one said panel.
I'm not sponsored by them. They sent.
I don't know, but I feel like I want to try it just to do my own testing.
Baked beans.
Right. People come up with some unique stuff.
Well, Adam, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a insightful conversation. I think I've learned a lot. I've made a special effort throughout the episode today to breathe through my nose. So I'll be taking that one away with me, and I'll let you know in a month if I've kept it up.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
I'll be watching you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you both. See you, Adam.